It was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that feels too full. The cameras were rolling. Joe Rogan sat across from Elon Musk, sipping from his signature coffee mug, grinning like he always did before asking something wild. But before Joe could speak, a small voice from the side of the studio interrupted everything. "Mr. Musk," the boy asked softly, standing just off camera, "do you think Jesus would like who you've become?" Elon froze. The question came from his own son, X. No cue cards, no prep, just raw curiosity, the kind only a child could summon. Joe's smile faded into a thoughtful silence, sensing something powerful had just entered the room. Elon didn't answer at first. He leaned back in the chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "That's not what I expected," he muttered. Joe tilted his head. "Do you talk about Jesus with your son?" "Not really," Elon said. "I mean, not until recently." X stepped forward. He wasn't shy, just honest. "Last week I had a dream," he said. "Jesus was there. He didn't look mad or holy or anything. He just sat beside me, and he asked me if I was listening." "Listening to what?" Joe asked, leaning in. X looked up at his dad, then back at Joe. "To my heart." The silence returned, but this time it was different, heavier. Elon rubbed his eyes. "You know what, Joe?" he said finally, his voice low. "I've been having these dreams too, not about money or rockets or Mars, but about him, about Jesus, not the Sunday school version, the real one." Joe's eyebrows rose. "What do you mean, the real one?" "The one who walks with the broken, who touches the sick without gloves, who doesn't care if you're a billionaire or a beggar," Elon replied almost to himself. "I keep seeing him sitting on the edge of my bed, not saying much, just being there." Joe nodded slowly, his usual bravado gone. "That's not what I expected to hear from you." "Me neither," Elon said. But X's question hit something I've been trying to ignore. Am I the kind of man Jesus would sit with, or walk away from? That question echoed through the room. It was the kind that made even Rogan speechless. Then X said something that stunned them both. "Dad, maybe he's not asking you to be perfect. Maybe he's just asking you to be real." Elon looked at his son, tears starting to pool. "You're right, and I don't know how to be real anymore." Joe leaned forward. "Maybe this is how it starts." Joe Rogan leaned back in his chair, the usual playful edge in his voice now replaced by something closer to reverence. "You ever told anyone that before?" he asked. Elon shook his head slowly. "No, not even to myself." There was something fragile in his voice now, like the weight he carried had finally cracked the surface. "People see the Tesla guy, the Mars guy, but they don't see the man who wakes up in the middle of the night wondering if all of this means anything." Joe glanced at X, who had quietly taken a seat next to his father. The boy looked calm, like he'd already known what his dad was just beginning to realize. "What do you think it means?" Joe asked gently. Elon stared at the floor. "Lately, I've started thinking. Maybe it's not about reaching the stars. Maybe it's about learning how to kneel." That line landed hard. Joe blinked. "Man, you don't talk like that in interviews." "I don't talk like that anywhere," Elon replied. "But the dreams won't stop, and in them Jesus never talks about success. He never mentions fame. He just sits with me, quiet, present." X turned to his dad. "Do you think he's trying to remind you of something?" Elon nodded slowly. "Yeah, of who I used to be, before the noise, before the pressure, before I started pretending that being strong meant being alone." There was a pause, heavy with reflection. Joe, always the curious one, pressed further. "You ever read the Sermon on the Mount?" "Not fully," Elon admitted, "but there's one line that keeps echoing in my mind. 'Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.' And I wonder, is that what I've lost? Purity of heart?" X reached for his dad's hand and held it tightly. Joe, clearly moved, asked, "Why now, Elon? Why is this all hitting you now?" Elon looked at him with raw honesty. "Because I've built everything a man could build. But when my son looked me in the eye and asked if Jesus would like who I've become, I realized I didn't know the answer, and that scared me more than any rocket explosion ever could." Joe leaned forward. "So what are you going to do?" Elon glanced at X. "I'm going to listen." "To what?" Joe asked. "To the silence," Elon said. "To the part of me that I've drowned out with ambition, the part that wants to stop building and start becoming." Joe nodded slowly, deeply moved. "You know, a lot of people are watching this, Elon. People who think they're too far gone, too hardened, too busy to change. What would you say to them? Elon didn't hesitate. I'd say, maybe Jesus isn't waiting for us to clean ourselves up. Maybe he's just waiting for us to stop running. Joe exhaled slowly, almost like he was releasing something he didn't know he'd been holding in. You know what's crazy? He said. I've talked to scientists, monks, presidents, even shamans, but no one ever talks about Jesus like this. Elon looked over, eyes soft. Maybe because we've turned him into a statue, or a theory, but not a friend. X leaned forward, curious. Dad, what were you like when you were my age? Elon paused. The question dug deeper than expected. I was a quiet kid, he said. I used to read books under the blankets at night. I wanted to understand the universe. I thought if I could figure out how everything worked, maybe I'd finally feel safe. Did it work? Joe asked. Elon smiled faintly, almost sadly. No, because the deeper I went into logic and science, the lonelier I became. It was like I had all the answers, but none of them healed me. There was a long silence. Then Elon continued, the truth is, I've always been running, from pain, from loss, from vulnerability. That's why I work so much. That's why I try to solve everything. But lately, I've started asking myself, what if the thing I'm avoiding is the very thing I need to face? Joe nodded, voice low. That's powerful, man. X whispered, Jesus said, come to me, all who are weary, and I will give you rest. Maybe you've been tired for a long time, Dad. Elon's throat tightened. He didn't respond right away. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water. Joe noticed, but didn't interrupt. You ever read what Jesus said after that? Elon asked. Joe shook his head. He said, take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Elon paused. Not rest for your body, not your business, your soul. The word soul lingered like incense in the air. Not religious, just real. I don't think I've ever rested there, Elon confessed. Not once. Joe leaned forward. You're not the only one, man. We build these versions of ourselves. Elon the innovator, Joe the fighter, whoever. But at some point, that mask starts to suffocate you. Elon nodded slowly. And when it finally cracks, you don't even know who's underneath. X held his father's hand again. But Jesus does. Elon looked at his son, then at Joe. I used to think I had to earn everything, respect, worth, love. But maybe Jesus already saw me as worthy, even when I didn't. Joe swallowed hard. You're saying you believe he still would sit with you? Elon looked into the camera now, not flinching. I think he never left. I think he's been beside me the whole time, waiting, not judging, just waiting. Joe leaned in, elbows on the table, his voice barely above a whisper. What does it feel like when you think he's there? Elon didn't answer right away. He looked up at the ceiling, eyes glassy, as if trying to find words buried deep beneath years of noise. It's not loud, he said. It's not like thunder or lightning. It's more like a whisper in a room I didn't know existed. X watched his father with a quiet awe. What does the whisper say? Elon glanced down. It doesn't say much. It's more of a presence, a calm, like someone finally sees me, not what I do or what I've built, but me, the kid under the blankets, the man who doesn't sleep, the father who's afraid he's not enough. Joe exhaled slowly. That's raw, man. Elon nodded. I spent my life proving things to people, making impossible things possible, but none of it filled the silence inside, until that presence came. Joe leaned back in his chair. You're talking about peace, the real kind. Yes, Elon said, and I didn't build it. I didn't buy it. I didn't earn it. It just showed up when I finally stopped running. X's voice broke the silence again. What if that's all Jesus wants, for us to stop running? Elon turned to his son. Then he's more patient than any man I've ever known. Joe sat there staring at them both. You could tell he was moved, but trying to process it. You're Elon Musk. You've sent rockets to space. You've built companies that changed the world. And now you're saying a quiet moment in your heart did more for you than all of that? Elon looked him straight in the eyes. Yes, because space is cold, success is loud, but neither hugged me in the middle of the night. That line landed with the weight of truth. Joe nodded slowly, visibly shaken. You know, I used to think religion was for the weak, but maybe it's for the honest. Elon gave a small smile. Or maybe it's for those who've reached the top and realized there's still something missing. A stillness fell over the room. X spoke again, his words careful but strong. When I saw Jesus in my dream, he didn't look powerful, he looked kind. I think people forget. That's where his strength really is. Elon squeezed his son's hand. Maybe the world doesn't need more powerful men. Maybe it needs more kind ones. Joe looked at Elon, a deep respect in his eyes. So what now? Elon glanced at the camera again, then back at Joe. Now, I stop pretending, I start listening, and maybe I start following. Following what? Joe asked. Elon's voice was soft but clear. The way he lived, that's all. Not religion, not rules, just love, just truth, just Jesus. Joe stared at Elon for a long moment, the kind of stare that goes beyond the man sitting in front of him and into the question behind his eyes. You ever wonder why now? Joe asked. Why this shift didn't happen years ago? Elon nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I was too busy being loud, too focused on proving I could do what others couldn't. But when I saw my son looking at me, not with admiration, but with questions, I realized I had built everything except a place where he could feel safe asking those things. X looked at him deeply. I wasn't trying to challenge you, Dad. I know, Elon replied. That's what made it so powerful. Joe leaned back, folding his arms. What's wild is, you didn't find Jesus in a church or a sermon. You found him in a dream, in your kid's voice. Elon chuckled lightly. And in the silence between rocket launches, I started noticing that the more I tried to fill my life with noise, headlines, innovation, the next big thing, the more I was starving for something quieter. Joe tilted his head. You ever read the part where Jesus walks away from the crowds? Elon nodded. Yes, that struck me. He didn't need constant applause. He withdrew, to pray, to sit in silence, to be with his Father. I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it did. X shifted in his chair. Maybe because deep down, you knew you needed the same thing. Elon looked at him with awe. You're probably right. There was a long pause. Joe broke it, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. You ever wonder what kind of father Jesus would have been? Elon blinked. The question came out of nowhere, but it struck deep. I never thought of that, he said. Joe smiled faintly. I think he would have sat through every question, every late-night fear, every "Dad, I messed up" moment, and just said, I'm still here. Elon's voice cracked. That's what I want to be for X. You still can, Joe said. It's not too late. Elon looked over at his son. I used to think being a father meant giving you the world. Now I think it means giving you my presence, my heart, my honesty. X nodded, eyes welling. That's all I ever wanted. Joe wiped a tear from his cheek without trying to hide it. Man, people need to hear this. They think God is far away. But maybe he's in the questions our kids ask. Maybe he's been right there all along. Elon breathed deeply. That's what the dreams feel like. Not like God is thundering from the sky. Just that he's sitting close, waiting for me to look up. X whispered, and now you have. Elon nodded, eyes full. Now I have. The air in the studio felt different now, less like a show, more like a sacred space. Joe looked around as if searching for the right words, then finally said, You know, if you had said all this on a press stage, people would have called it a stunt. But sitting here and it just feels real. Elon nodded, his voice calm. Because I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just finally telling the truth. X leaned closer to the mic, his voice small but clear. Dad, do you think other people feel this way too, like empty even when they have everything? Elon turned to him with gentle eyes. I think most do. They just don't say it out loud. Or maybe they don't know what they're missing. Joe interjected, That's what makes this powerful, because it's you saying it. If the richest man on earth says peace doesn't come from what you own, people might actually stop and listen. There was a silence that settled in the room again, thick, holy almost. Elon leaned forward, his hands resting on the table. Sometimes I imagine what would happen if the whole world paused, just stopped for 1 minute. No phones, no meetings, no headlines, just silence. I wonder if people would hear what I'm starting to hear. What's that? Joe asked. Elon looked straight at him. That we're loved, not because of our power, but in spite of our weakness. X smiled. That's what Jesus showed people, right? He sat with the ones no one wanted. He healed people that others ignored. He didn't yell or force. He just loved. Joe leaned back, visibly moved. You know, I used to mock that kind of talk. Thought it was weak. But maybe love like that isn't weak at all. Maybe it's the strongest thing there is. Elon nodded slowly. Love that doesn't need to win. Love that shows up anyway. That's what breaks you, in a good way. X gently added, that's what your dreams were showing you, Dad. Not a god of fire, but a friend. Joe was silent, absorbing it all. Then he asked, so what now? Are you going to tell the world? Elon paused, then said softly, maybe the world doesn't need another press release. Maybe it just needs more conversations like this, where a father listens, where a son speaks truth, where a man admits he's not enough, but he's finally okay with that. Joe looked directly at Elon. If this changes one person, it's worth it. Elon turned toward the camera again. To the person watching this, wondering if you've gone too far, if your heart's too numb, or if God has forgotten you, I want you to know, he hasn't. He's still sitting beside you like he sat beside me. X leaned into the mic and whispered, maybe now it's your turn to listen. Joe cleared his throat, visibly affected. You know what's crazy? He said, breaking the silence. We started this podcast thinking we'd talk about tech, Mars, maybe AI taking over the world. But this is the most human thing I've ever recorded. Elon gave a small reflective smile. Maybe the most human thing is admitting we're more than logic. X chimed in, and we're more than what we do. Joe looked at him, eyebrows raised. Where'd you learn that, kid? X shrugged. When I asked Dad if Jesus would like who he's become, I wasn't trying to be deep. I just wanted to know if he was happy with who he was when no one was watching. Elon's expression softened. That question hit me harder than any launch failure ever did. Why? Joe asked. Because it made me realize that I didn't know the answer, Elon said. And that terrified me. Not because I thought Jesus would hate me, but because I suddenly cared what he thought. For the first time, I wanted to be the kind of man he'd sit beside without needing to change the subject. Joe leaned in again. So, do you think he would? Elon's eyes moistened. Now? I think he would. Not because I've fixed everything, but because I've stopped pretending I don't need him. The camera rolled silently. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a confession, a turning point, a glimpse into the heart of a man who had lived among the stars but had just now found something higher. Joe tapped the table softly. I don't usually ask this on the show, but what would you say to Jesus if he walked into this room right now? Elon's lips trembled, and for a moment he didn't speak. Then with a shaky breath he said, I'd say, I'm sorry I took so long. I've chased brilliance and missed the beauty. I've worked endlessly and missed your whisper. But if you'll still have me, I'm here now. The studio fell into a still silence. Not a single word, just the hum of presence. And something about it felt sacred. X leaned close and said quietly, He would have already forgiven you, Dad. That's what he does. Joe wiped at his eyes. Man, if people watch this and don't feel something, I don't know what else could wake them up. Elon looked into the camera one more time. If you're watching this, and your heart is tired, ask the question my son asked me. Would Jesus like who you've become? And if the answer scares you, that's okay. That's where grace begins. Joe reached out and put a hand on Elon's shoulder. Thanks for being brave, man. Elon nodded. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't creating a future, it's confronting your past. The studio lights cast a gentle glow now, not harsh like before. It felt more like a fireside than a podcast set. Joe, Elon, and little X sat in a stillness that didn't beg to be filled, but welcomed something sacred. Joe broke the silence with a shaky laugh. So what happens when this goes out? The internet's gonna go wild. Elon smiled, but this time it wasn't a performer's grin. It was peace. Let them talk. For once, I'm not saying something to impress anyone. I'm saying it so people know, no, they're not alone. X looked over at his father and said something that almost sounded rehearsed, but was born purely from a child's honesty. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. Elon nodded, voice barely audible. I'm just learning that now. Joe stared at them both, his usual edge softened. I've spent my life chasing intensity, Elon. Adrenaline, debate, deep dives into ideas. But tonight, this felt different, slower, heavier, like something eternal brushed past us. Elon looked him in the eyes. Because it did. Joe leaned in. You think this is what Jesus meant when he talked about the kingdom of God? Elon smiled gently. Not a place, not a temple, just a table, with people willing to be honest. A place where a father listens, a son speaks truth, and a friend sits still enough to hear heaven whisper. X whispered, that's the kingdom. Joe turned toward the camera, not out of obligation, but with conviction. Maybe you're watching this thinking, I'm not religious. Doesn't matter. We're not selling religion. We're just inviting you to sit at this table, with your questions, your fears, your doubts, and your hope. Elon added, if you're waiting for the perfect moment to change, it won't come. But if you're tired, if you're really tired of pretending, just say what I said. I'm here now. That's where it begins. X looked up at his dad. Can I tell them one more thing? Elon nodded. The boy turned to the mic. When I had that dream about Jesus, he didn't say anything fancy. He just looked at me with eyes that knew everything about me and still wanted to stay. That's what love is. That's who Jesus is. Silence again. This time full, not empty. Joe leaned back, arms crossed, shaking his head slowly. Man, I never expected this. Elon looked at him. Nobody did. A small smile crept across Joe's face. Nobody expected Elon Musk to say this about Jesus, not even me. Elon chuckled, wiping a tear. But maybe it was never about who said it. Maybe it was just time someone did. The three sat quietly, the weight of the moment settling in like a soft rain. And somewhere beyond the studio walls, beyond the noise of the world, a single heart, watching, listening, paused, and began to hear the whisper too.